Women in the Know. Women in the Know is the show where we discuss everything from politics to policy to relationships to marketing, from franchise growth to difficulties between franchisees and franchisors. Today's topic um, goes very nicely with our interview that we recently did with Nancy Bigley. Why do so many leaders have imposter syndrome? Rebecca, what do you think?
Wow. Well, it's interesting because this imposter syndrome is growing in the last, several years, in part because of social media, but also because we're talking about it. I remember years ago doing some research on what was called supernovas, the idea that people get super successful and then they sabotage themselves, whether in sports or business or whatever. And I think this imposter syndrome leads to that, this feelings of underneath that who I am is not what I feel I am inside. So that self-doubt, the feelings of inadequacy. Nancy talked about this perfectionistic attitude that, if I do it right, I do it perfect, then I'm not an imposter. I'm the real McCoy. And I think some of it's also just the fear of being judged, right? And that what I'm presenting as a leader, especially a leader as Nancy is talking about, inside there's not that congruity, that consistency. I don't feel that my outside is the same as what I'm feeling inside. So it oftentimes feels like someone is an imposter. So they're rising and they're rising, but there's some incongruity. There's a disconnect that goes on. But it's becoming much, much more prevalent, this imposter syndrome.
It's an interesting thing too. We were talking about it the other day, and I think I said something like, if somebody looked at my bio that I put on everything, they might think I'm something. And I remember the first time, because I don't feel like something, but I remember I wrote for the Huffington Post for a while, and I was trying to build a platform for my book. So I wrote and wrote and wrote. It was about online dating. So I was writing on their divorce page and writing all these things. And Plenty of Fish, the CEO of Plenty of Fish, had his marketing people reach out to me and ask if I would profile him. And none of this was paid. It was a blog on the Huffington Post, so I wasn't an employee. But I just thought, who does he think I am? I mean, that's so interesting to me. Who does he think I am that I'm going to get him publicity or do whatever? Instead of thinking, oh, he read what I wrote, he liked what I wrote, and he thinks I have something to offer him in terms of getting some visibility. And it's just a funny little mindset thing, because
it is.
You can make anybody look good with words, but believing those words, like I wrote a resume one time for a friend of mine who'd been a stay-at-home mom for 20 years, but she was the most on it, go-getting type person. She was in charge of ETAs, and she raised $10,000 for some fundraiser at school, and she was in charge of everything. So when I wrote her resume and put her skill sets down, it looked like she'd been employed the whole time. And she got hired, but she had not seen herself that way.
No.
But I'm like, but look at all these things you've done. You've raised money at tennis tournaments, and you've chaired committees, and you've been in charge of. She was always large and in charge. One of those. She was a little tiny person who was always in charge. But you have to see yourself that way. She's like, I don't have anything to put on my resume, but she did. I mean, it ended up looking pretty darn good. So it's perception partly, and embracing your own reality.
Embracing your own reality, which is what Nancy was talking about, is that self-assessment. And then the second thing she talked about, and I think applies here, and what your friend did with getting you to help her with a resume, is to talk to others and see how they see us, because they're going to see us in our full glory. We're going to see ourselves as dorky and not fully evolved yet, right? We don't see ourselves how others see us. So having those folks around us that can give us feedback, self-assessing on a regular basis, getting out of the perfectionistic side of us that we have to have it all together and be perfect, and know that God is not through with any of us. None of us are done learning, and that's not an easy thing to do, because you're right, on paper sometimes we look a little different than what we look like in our heads and in our hearts. You know, your story is one that I can fully relate to. I do a lot of work with the University of Texas at Arlington, where Zorkel provides a lot of data, psychographic data, for their PhD students, their statistics students, and they write their dissertations on our data and the research. And so every once in a while, I got to get together with these professors, you know, they're all PhDs in a room, and they're using these big old hairy words and concepts, and yet they're looking to me to have the answers and the projects. And oftentimes I go in there and I feel this big, and yet they see me like this. So you do have to step back and say, what's the reality? The reality is probably somewhere between those two extremes, how others see us as perfect and how we see ourselves as imperfect, right?
Right. But the interesting thing too is they see you as an authority, and you're still feeling like you're not the authority when you really are. Whether you have a PhD or feel as lofty as that you think they are, accepting that authority when it's given to you. People generally don't give it to you if you haven't earned it, I find. You know?
Oh, what a great way to look at it. I like that. What a wonderful
So
reframe.
you just have to say, thank you.
Thank you. How can I
have
help?
a hard time taking compliments. My husband, when I was dating him, told me, he's like, you look uncomfortable every time I give you a compliment. I said, well, kind of I am. But he has taught me how to just say thank you, the end. And not say, oh, but, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, but I'm not really that great. Oh, but I'm not really that whatever. Just thank you.
Yeah, so it's kind of this combination of remaining in a place of humility, because arrogance will have us puff up and be something we're not, which is not what imposter syndrome really is. It's this belief that we're nothing when in fact we are something. But it's keeping a level of humility that says, I haven't arrived yet. I still have a lot to learn. There's still people I can learn from, and situations I can gain some wisdom from. But at the same time, accepting whatever that compliment is, or the authority, or the respect that we are receiving at its face value. Don't reject it, but instead, okay, I've earned a certain level of authority or credibility or whatever, but I still have much to learn. I think it's balancing those two extremes.
It is hard, tight rope to walk.
Exactly. So obviously this is a conversation we could go on, and maybe we can pick it up in another conversation down the road. But we need to wrap up and go to another one of our sponsors.